All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Code for Science and Society quarterly community call. I'm super excited to be hosting. We have a great list of speakers and updates from our projects, including jobs at different projects. So we're excited about that. For those of you who are new to the community call, I want to take a minute and orient you to the Etherpad. I see some unnamed people tuning in. And so if you go up into the upper right-hand corner of the Etherpad, you can type your name in the little white rectangle, and then you can select your color. And then I'd like you to go ahead over to line 20 and sign in below. And you can put some information about yourself and how to contact you. So give a minute while people do that who are joining us on the live stream. You can also chat below where your names are, and I can say, hello, everyone. And I'll spell it correctly. Nope, just kidding, I won't. Okay, so I think without further ado, while we're seeing some folks sign in down there, we will just get going. So the agenda, the run of show, here's what's about to happen. We'll start with some community updates. And while I'm talking, I encourage you to go onto what is now line 59 and add projects that you're interested in, things you're watching, conferences you're going to apply to, or conferences where you're speaking, and other fun links. I won't read those out, but it's a great way just to let people know what's going on. So we'll go through community announcements and Code for Science and Society updates. And then we'll go into today's speakers. We have a couple of speakers who are going to talk about data ownership. The first is Kirsty Whitaker. Dr. Whitaker is at the Turing Institute for Data Science in the UK, where she works with human subjects research and does a lot of really interesting neuroscience, cognitive neuroscience work. Then Bradley and Terry from Offline Camp will be speaking about building offline first technologies. And then we had a little speaker switcheroo at the last minute, and Open Knowledge International stepped in to speak. I think I do see Lily on the call. So Dr. Winfrey works at Open Knowledge International, and she'll tell us about that organization and their mission. Then Gina, Gian, Paolo will talk about DAT Night. And then we'll move into updates from our projects. Are we ready to go? Ready to go? Okay, yes, let's do it. So community announcements, awesome. I already see some new things coming in. Data Terra Nemo, that's a really good one. So just keep checking out that stuff. And in the meantime, I'm just going to go ahead and do our Code for Science and Society updates. I want to start by offering major congratulations to Stencilla and Pre-Review. These are two of our sponsored projects that have received big, nice, exciting grants in the last couple of months, and they will both talk about that in more detail. I also wanted to direct your attention to, we've been working, if you remember from the last call, on the Open Source Alliance for Open Scholarship. We have some brand new published pieces that just came back from the editor. They're so new that we're still getting comments from the authors. But if you want to learn a little bit about how our experience raising money, our perspective on funding for open source, for open scholarship and other public interest technologies, you can check out that link. And if you want to write about your experiences, we'd love to hear them. And I think adding an extra layer of transparency in the ecosystem is really important. We have an asynchronous update from our fellow, Darius Kazemi. I'm not going to read it out loud, but you can check it out, see what he's working on. He's at the Mozilla event in Orlando right now, probably at Space Mountain. I don't know. That's where I'd be. So if you have any questions for Darius, I'll make sure that he checks this out and answers them. But without further chatting from me, I think I want to just move right into the speakers. So Offline Camp folks, Terry and Bradley, are you unmuted? Can we hear you?
Hey, hello,
all
thanks
right.
for having us.
Excellent.
Hi there.
Thank you for joining us. All right, go for it.
Sure. So my name is Terry Chadbourne. I am a community manager at Protocol Labs, which is focused on decentralized networking protocols.
Hey everyone, I'm Bradley Holtz. I lead developer advocacy for the Center for Open Source Data and AI Technologies at IBM. I'm also, along with Terry, co-organizer of Offline Camp. So before we tell you a little bit about offline camp, let's back up and just talk a little bit about offline first in this community and kind of what's happening in this space. So offline first, if you haven't heard the term, it's most often associated with progressive web apps. Building applications that are designed to work under no network condition, but then are progressively enhanced to work better if there is an internet connection available. But with the offline first community, we actually have a really broad range of people that are interested in this. And I'll talk more in a few minutes about the wide interest area here, but definitely some decentralized web people involved and lots of interesting things. We try to keep the definition fairly broad for the offline first community.
Yeah, and our favorite thing about offline camp is that it's a chance to bring that community together. So what we do is we essentially find a lodge in the woods somewhere and bring about 30 people together for a long weekend. We room together, we eat together, and we chat together about ways that we can push the offline first movement forward. So we have a big mix of people, like Bradley mentioned, but the structure of the event is really meant to put everyone on the same level and encourage everyone's opinions to be shared. So we do the event as an unconference with the attendees proposing topics. We will go off, split into little discussions for an hour, come back and share with the group. And those discussions kind of carry forward.
Yeah, so we actually, one of the interesting things we do, and what's really cool to see come out of offline camp is that all of these unconference sessions, pretty much all of them have turned into posts for our Medium publication. And these are written by people that actually participated in an offline camp. So we've done 4 offline camps to date. And we've got a really great stuff all written on the Medium publication. So if you look at the stuff that's been written and the articles that people have written, you'll see some themes emerge. So I mentioned progressive web apps. So progressive web apps, service workers, that's a pretty common theme to see. There's quite a few people who are involved in the CouchDB and the PouchDB community. So those are open source database technologies. There are quite a few people who are interested in the user experience of offline first. Offline first is kind of a different approach to building applications, and it sort of needs some nuances as far as how you approach the user experience. We have quite a good contingent of people who are interested in decentralized web, like Beaker browser, DAT, all that stuff, and that's where we get into issues of censorship, security, data ownership. Those things all become really relevant around those conversations. And there's also quite a few conversations around offline first as an approach for the developing world, and how this could be a really good fit for kind of serving the next billion people that are coming online.
Yeah, so our time being limited, we wanted to leave you with a few links if you're curious to learn more. So at the moment in the Etherpad, those links are down on line 133. I'm sure they're moving as we go. But you'll find there places you can learn more about offline first in general. We've curated a lot of resources about offline camp. There's a sort of a sign up form if you think you might be interested in attending an offline camp. You can sort of register your interest, and that will help us figure out where we should take the next event. We're still planning. If you're interested in sponsoring or writing a blog post, you can reach out to us by email. You'll find the information there. The Medium publication, like Bradley said, has a lot of great content to get started, and it's kind of broken out by categories. So if you're interested in learning particularly about decentralized, which might have the most overlap with the data ownership concept, that's a great place to go. You can find our Twitter account there as well. And just to mention, I heard Data Terra Nemo mentioned that is organized by an offline camp alum, and there's an offline camp alum speaking at it. So there's a lot of overlap between offline first and the decentralized community in this whole field.
That's awesome. So I had a question, and I just put it in the Etherpad, and I'm going to stall a minute while the live stream catches up. If anyone else has questions, you should just add them below line 145. I was curious about whether you've always done them in North America, and if you thought about running satellite events in other places, not on the call right now, but our community members who work for digital democracy. So they build offline friendly mapping software, and their users are in the jungle in the Amazon. And so I know they have these like unique issues that have to do with humidity and rain.
Yeah,
that's this extra layer. So
yeah, It's those kinds of use cases are so awesome because they're usually perfect for offline first, and they're things that we, and I at least am in a pretty privileged circumstance day to day where I don't bump into serious network problems all the time. But it's awesome to think about those kinds of use cases. They're not always in North America. We have done 3 in the US so far and 1 in Berlin, and we move around. We use that interest forum to affect where we end up going. Yeah, so we'd love input through that forum on where you guys would like to see us take the next event.
Cool. And so one follow-up question: do you have requirements for what needs to exist to run an event? I'm assuming you don't need Wi-Fi. So
we usually do have Wi-Fi, which really confuses people when they see us tweeting from offline camp.
They're very confused. Although usually it happens to be fairly crappy. So we would need to plan a little more in advance. We could definitely survive without Wi-Fi, but it's the biggest challenge is the venue, because we're trying to find very intentionally a place where 30 people can live together in the same place, share bedrooms but not beds, and have enough space to break out into 3 or 4 discussion groups at one time. So it's really about finding that right, like, cozy environment. We like to get it, and these places end up being, you know, a 6-hour drive from civilization to get to that place where we're like in nature and just hanging out with each other. So it's really about venues.
That sounds awesome. All right, someone else is Eric on the chat is talking about camping in the camps in the Arctic Circle. Have you ever considered going to Antarctica or other similar research stations? I feel like offline technology has huge applications for remote research.
That sounds very adventurous. I don't know.
It's really cold. That sounds like a place where we would not get enough attendees to support the event, to be honest with you. It's a cool use case, but one of the things that's really nice about offline camp is the mix of attendees that are there. So we haven't had an event where we're specifically focusing on one use case. What we're doing is looking at the folks who are there, who are across a whole spectrum of web developers and UX people and people working on the Ebola crisis and people working on decentralized solutions with different technology, and finding the overlap in their interests. So I'm a little bit concerned that a place like that would lead to a very narrow focus, which would be
that's probably true.
Yeah.
Well, that's really exciting. I'm going to say let's move on to the next speaker because we've been talking for about 7 minutes. And so Kirsty, you're up next. If questions continue to come in for Bradley and Terry, please add them below line 146, and Bradley and Terry will answer them in the pad. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much. That sounds amazing. And I love how much thought you put into kind of the space for the event. So it just sounds absolutely awesome. So we're sort of changing, I think, from like a wonderfully intentional kind of focused project to sort of the other side, which is one of the things that I wanted to talk about today is some of the work that I'm doing at the Alan Turing Institute to try and get researchers to think a little bit more carefully about the data that they use when they do data science. So just as a little background about me, my name is Kirsty. I was a Mozilla Fellow for Science a couple of years ago. I have a PhD in neuroscience, and I always joke that I accidentally did the wrong ethics form in my training for my PhD. So I did the 3-hour animal neuroscience ethics and realized that that was the wrong one. And so then I did the 3-hour human ethics approval. And one of the reasons that I was asked to chair the ethics advisory group at the Turing Institute, which is the UK's National Institute for Data Science and Artificial Intelligence, is that I have some experience doing traditional ethics approvals. So I've worked with teenage brain development, and so bringing young people into our MRI scanners and asking them to consent for us to use their brain images, non-invasive brain images, just to be clear. But I also think that those forms are overly bureaucratic and miss some of the point about agency of the participants who are sharing their data with us. And I've also been in enough places where I've heard data scientists from a whole bunch of different backgrounds, when asked about the potential consequences of their work, say, I don't know anything about that. I'm just the person who wrote the code. And it like fills me with a white hot rage when people abstain from their responsibility like that. So what we're doing is we're trying to sort of, in a friendly, but we can also stop you from getting funded way, ask all of the projects that are run by the Turing, asking all of the researchers, the lead investigators, to tell us about their project around 3 ethical principles. So around consent, privacy and security, and then additional harms or societal harms. And I know we're sort of focusing on this call about data ownership, so maybe I'll sort of focus primarily on the consent aspect. And one of there's 2 sort of points that I wanted to highlight to you. Probably the folks on this call already know, but I guess I'm trying to translate that to a broader audience of researchers who maybe haven't thought about it. Is 1, just because data is available on the web doesn't really mean that people have consented to be part of your research on that part. And also, as you process data, you actually sort of change its value. So by labeling data, by categorizing data, for example, websites, or for example, tweets that contain hate speech, you actually make that data much more sensitive. So one of the things that goes kind of against my advocacy for open data is acknowledging the fact that some of the research that data scientists around the world are doing is actually making that somewhat innocuous data, when it's created, much more sensitive. And so we sort of ask people to think very carefully about whether what they are doing makes the data more sensitive, such that they should be more careful about sharing it. And then the flip side is thinking about actually communicating with research participants and asking them what would they like to be done with their data. So in a different context, there's an application form that participants in Cambridge can fill in when they come in for an MRI scan. And they can say, yes, I consent to being part of this study. And in a separate box, they can say, yes, I consent to making my data publicly available. And the education that has to come with sort of the sort of responsibility for communicating to those participants the risk of making their data publicly available is really important. But I think we're doing some really great work, and I say we as in very sort of inclusive in this whole broad data science and society community, thinking about not being quite so paternalistic about guarding research data so strongly. So a traditional ethics proposal would say, I'm going to collect the data, I'm going to have it in a locked filing cabinet, because we all know that that is actually probably the most secure place to put your data. And that 5 years after the end of the research project, I promise that I will shred it, I will destroy it, and I will get rid of everything. And first of all, I don't actually think that people necessarily do that. And second of all, that sort of violates actually doing really good, reproducible, and responsible, transparent research that can be reused by others. So I think I'm probably running out of time, so I will I'll stop talking. But I just wanted to sort of maybe highlight, and I'm happy to answer any questions or take any sort of suggestions or kind of great pieces of writing that you know of that can compel people who have maybe traditionally not thought very carefully about these ethical considerations of data ownership, that I can kind of spread back. Oh, I think I can't hear you, Danielle. Are you muted?
I'm muted, thank you. I had a quick question for you while we wait for anyone who has questions to add them to the Etherpad. I'm curious, when you speak to research subjects or young people who might be in your the group of people who you would be recruiting, what do they want their data? How do they want it to be handled?
Yeah, so most people are really surprised that researchers do so little with their data. I think the biggest sort of hype, the most information that has gone across to, let's talk specifically about people in the UK, is corporations mining their health data. And that sort of has put data sharing under like a real sort of negative lens, and people are very nervous about it. But actually, when you speak with them, they say, well, but surely the researchers were doing that anyway. And we respond, no, it takes 2.5 years to get access to a very, very specific column of your data, and we can't get access to anything else, which I personally think is and they generally agree is a barrier to doing the important research in, for example, health that's necessary to do. So I think most people, if they're given the option, are happy to have data shared. I know that there are some communities in particular where a lot of these kinds of participatory conversations have happened, and they tend to be very, very keen to know what the data will be used for. So they're generally pretty happy to share it, so long as we're transparent as researchers about what we're going to do.
Okay. All right. Well, we're out of time for Kirsty. So thank you so much, Kirsty, for giving us your perspective here. And if anyone else has questions for Dr. Whitaker, just add them below line 199, and she'll answer them as the call continues. Next up, I want to introduce Lily Winfrey. And are you there, Lily? Because we did not get a chance. Okay, you are there. We can hear you. We can't see you, but that's good enough.
Yeah, sorry, for some reason I can't figure out how to get my video to work, so you'll just have to hear me today.
That's fine. So Dr. Winfrey is with Open Knowledge International, and I'll let her tell us a little bit about what that organization does.
Yeah, so nice to see all of you. I am working for Open Knowledge International, as Danielle said, and I also have my PhD in neuroscience, like Kirsty, and now I'm working on Open Knowledge's Frictionless Data for Reproducible Research project. And I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with Open Knowledge, but we are a global nonprofit that began in 2004. And we're really focused on open data and opening up knowledge in general. We believe that knowledge is power, and we want to bring that power to the people. They've been doing a lot of projects over the last, 14 years, focused on really like the government tech space, and now are trying to work more with researchers and get into open science and working on making science more reproducible overall. So I'm fairly new to the team, but I wanted to tell you about some of the projects that Open Knowledge has done in the past. And I put a lot of links in my description around like line 222 to 235 so that you guys can click along and look at some of these projects. But first, and I'll just do this briefly, the one I want to tell you about first is School of Data. And that's kind of what it sounds like. It is teaching people and organizations kind of like what data is and what you can do with data. And there's been a lot of work done in developing countries around School of Data. It's a really cool project, in my opinion. There's the Global Open Data Index, which is a ranking of countries based on how open their government data is. So that's also kind of fun to look at. There's Open Trials, which is a big database of clinical research trial data that's all openly available. And then there's Frictionless Data, which is the project that I am on. And again, you can click on that link there to learn more about these and other projects. But I want to tell you guys more about Frictionless Data for Reproducible Research. This is a fairly new project, and we're funded by the Sloan Foundation. And within this project, I'm going to be working with researchers. And so if anything I tell you sounds really interesting, please follow up with me because I'd love to talk to you more about it. But we're really focused on working with researchers to make their data more interoperable, more shareable, and more reproducible. I'm not sure if y'all have heard of the reproducibility crisis in science, but there are especially certain fields where a lot of research that has been published cannot be reproduced. which is not good. So we're trying to get in and work with researchers to, do things like encourage best practices for data management and also just encourage open science in general. And this is built upon frictionless data tooling and specs. And I put some links again in the notes for that. But I just tell you very briefly, some of the tooling and specs that frictionless data has made. Say you have like a tabular CSV data file, but you don't have a data dictionary or any metadata to go with it. We have a tool where you can insert your tabular file and then it'll immediately create some JSON metadata for you, which is awesome. And then we also have tools where you can validate your tabular data, and also working on creating data pipelines for researchers to improve their data ingest workflows. So I know that was a lot of information really quickly, but I would love for you to click the links and let me know if you have any questions, play around with the tools. We're really looking for feedback, especially from researchers, because, I said that we've done a lot of work in the government space, but not as much work with actual researchers before. So we would love some feedback. And if you have any data management problems and you need some help, I would love to hear from you. We have funding and time to help researchers. So we're trying to start pilots. And yeah, if you have any questions, please let me know. I'd also encourage you to join our community. We have a really great community with different groups in over 40 countries. You can link. There's links to the Discuss, which is a nice chat, and then also Gitter. All right.
So Lily, you're about at 5 minutes. I want to open it up to questions. We have a couple of comments that are coming in. And while that person is typing, I'll just ask you, I heard that you did a workshop the other day. Are you looking to visit campuses or visit research institutions and talk about this?
Definitely. Yeah. I can put those slides in the comment section in a second too. But yeah, I would give workshops. We also have our great developer advocate, Sarah, who can't make it today, but she's in Estonia, so she can also give workshops in Europe, etc. And I'm based in the US, so yeah, love to grow our network and talk to more scientists.
That sounds great. So a question came in on the pad. What's the average response of academics to your offer to help?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're, still very early on in this project, but so far the response has been very positive, which is nice to see. I'm a scientist by training, and so I know that there's a lot of hesitancy for certain scientists to publish openly and to publish their data. So it's been nice to have as much of a positive response as I've gotten. I guess I was expecting more pushback and people have been more positive.
Sounds great. All right.
Yeah.
Well, if any more questions come in, they'll come in on the Etherpad, and I want to keep it rolling right on to Gina.
Great,
so
thanks.
Gina Gianpaolo is a software developer, and she is interested in the decentralized web and peer-to-peer technologies. And she recently initiated an event called Dat Night, and we're excited to have her chat a little bit about that.
I'm excited to be here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so a little bit about me. My name is Gina Gianpaolo. I'm a designer and a front-end developer at Rumors, which is a studio in Portland. We build web applications, brands, and visual identities for clients all over the place. And last spring, we had a brainstorm with Danielle and Joe from CSNS to talk about ways to work with that and also promote it within our communities. And we got Dat Night. So we had already been thinking about this in the studio in terms of how can we build tools that get people to use this tech like normal people, not just nerds. And we wanted to get a real life community around these ideas going. And so Dat Night is a thing that I kind of willed into existence in November, a couple of weeks ago. So the structure of Dat Night was kind of experimental. I wanted to see if anyone would show up at all. But 20 people showed up, which was great. Actually, 40 people RSVP'd. So it was very exciting to see that there was a hole that needed to be filled with this meetup. In terms of structure, we had 3 or 4 speakers and then a hands-on workshop. And it went pretty well. The general goals of that night are to like provide people an informal and a casual space where they feel comfortable saying they don't know something, because this is a pretty complex technology and a new way of thinking and working. I want to have hands-on workshops that lead to attendees interacting with one another without a laptop between them. So, you know, actually looking at each other's faces and speaking, that's always good. I have a secret rule for myself that only one of the talks can be a technical demo. I don't want people, you know, snoozing in a darkened room after work while someone types JavaScript on a screen. I want people to be interacting, and that it's people first. We're trying to just build a network and a community of local people interested in peer-to-peer, and a network that actually talks to each other in real life. So we had it last Thursday. It was actually a week ago, not several weeks ago. Surprise. It was at Mozilla in Portland. Thank you to Irakli and Dietrich for helping facilitate that. If they're here, I don't know if they are. We heard from Johan, who's here, Darius, and Irakli, and myself. We gave probably 10-ish minute talks. Irakli's talk was the most technical of all, but there was no code on the screen, so that was cool. We did a workshop where attendees made a name tag in Beaker, and this was a trick from me to have them each respond to the question, why are you excited about peer-to-peer? And it worked pretty well. I'm going to share my screen now to show that the framework of that, if I can figure out how to do it. Play Beaker. Is that working? Hey.
Yes, there we go.
Hey, ta-da. So here's the .NET website. If you want to learn more, you can go to .NET.org. If you want to sign up for our mailing list, you can here. You can also follow us on Twitter. So the workshop was based around this name tag that I developed using a bunch of old classic Mac OS stuff. The idea was that people could fork this or make an editable copy of this in Beaker, and then just change it to customize, you know, to answer this question, why they're excited about the peer-to-peer web, to kind of personalize. A lot of people participated. Here was mine. Here's someone named Nate's. These are all the other people who participated. Caleb, Chris. Here's a great one with Emily. She knows HTML, obviously. I wanted to create a workshop that would get people who were like front-end developers and just like regular people who maybe are intimidated by Beaker and by DAT to see how easy it is to get started. I mean, it's really just clicking a button, publishing it, and it's live. So we did that, and then I made people talk to each other. We were going to demonstrate the kind of network connections people made when they added each other to this My Friends section with strings. So every time you added a person to My Friends, you would take a piece of colored string and connect to that person in real life as well. So this got, you know, people up and moving around and looking at each other. There's the letters that I glittered. But it was a great way to kind of get people to stop looking at their computers and stand up and realize, like, this is the network. This is our decentralized network. It only exists between us. If we close our laptops, it's gone. But it's just, I don't know of like if conceptually or metaphorically it was like the most sound of workshops, but it worked out just fine. And people had a lot of fun. So I think
great.
the goal was to make people do something weird. So how am I doing on time?
You're great.
Am I good?
I was going to point out you have a couple of questions.
Okay.
One person is asking, which audiences are you aiming to serve and which are you specifically not aiming to serve, if there are any?
Ooh.
And then, yeah.
I would love to, I'm kind of aiming it at regular people, but I know that that's kind of a tough ask because it's such a technical thing. I am very interested in kind of doing, I'm sharing my whole screen now. What did I do?
I think you stopped sharing.
Oh, that's perfect. Okay, that's what I meant.
Well, now you're sharing again, so maybe.
Okay. I want to target especially like art students and other students. I can't unshare. How do I unshare? Sorry, y'all.
Oh, it's
Exit
okay.
screen share.
Yeah, there you
There
go.
we go. That's me in my face. I would love to target front-end developers, artists, designers, students. I'm not super interested in talking about the blockchain. I don't know how like I saw when the event kind of gets shared in those circles, and I was kind of worried maybe I was disappointing people by not talking at all about like IPFS and Filecoin. But I'm really, really interested in promoting kind of like the idea that you can control your own data within that. You can form these peer-to-peer networks. You can empower creators with these kind of workshops, and less about like larger things. It's just, I want to provide an introduction for people so that they learn that it's easy to get started. And then from there, we can start to build a critical mass of people who are actually engaged with these communities and using these tools.
Cool. So there's one more question. I asked if the workshop is forkable and remixable, but we don't have that much time. So maybe you could go on to answer this question about science fiction and narrative and art as a mode of engagement.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Where is that?
That person asked on line 288, would you be open to using science fiction, narrative, art as one mode of engagement? I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I want it to be weird. You know, I want this to be like the meetup in Portland that people go to and they're just like, that was very strange. So like any existing ways that can like be a framework that allows us to think about these technologies, totally open to it.
Sounds great. All right, well, let's move on. Any more questions for Gina? Drop them in the box. I think that the workshop is forkable and remixable if you're interested in trying to run something like that in your own town. So more questions there. And then we're going to move on to our sponsored projects. And as I alluded to in the beginning, we've got some good news that's even going to lead to some job searches. So take it away, Aleksandra and Nakomi.
Hi, my name is Aleksandra. I work as a community advocate for Mozilla. And here's Nakomi with me. Nakomi?
Hi, I'm Nakomi.
Who is the main creator of Mozilla. And so do we want to say something about the jobs or go straight to our presentation?
Yeah, let's talk about the jobs first. So we've fortunate to get some funding from the Sloan Foundation. Thanks very much to the Sloan Foundation for that, to keep us going for another year and work on all the tools that we're working on. So that's really great. And as part of that, we're growing our core team. And so we'll be looking at hiring 2 full-time positions, including a software engineer, mostly front end, and someone on the product design, UX, UI stuff. So follow us on Twitter because we'll be posting some job descriptions soon, and tell your friends and apply yourselves.
And for a fun fact, Nakomi and Aleksandra are both based in New Zealand. So I'm just saying, the person who gets this job may also need to be required to travel to New Zealand at least once. So there's
it's not compulsory, but yeah. And so I'll hand it over to Aleksandra to talk about a tool that we've been working on over the last month or 2.
Okay, thank you. So I'll get my sharing. Okay, can you see my screen? Hello? Yeah?
Yes, we see it. We do see it.
Okay. Okay. I will talk about a tool called Doctor that we've been working on for the past several weeks. And it's a tool that helps with research reproducibility and makes the steps towards reproducibility for researchers much easier. Reproducibility can be very complex and becomes more and more complex. So interactive reproducible paper that contains bits of code may require quite a lot of pre-setup if you want to be able to reproduce what is in there. So if you want to be able to work in the same environment, you may have to take care of the version of the packages, install the right programming languages, check all the system dependencies and requirements, capture it and curate the metadata, particular metadata related to the document. Make sure that everybody who should get the credit gets the credit. And one of the solutions that has been around for a while and researchers have been using is using Docker. It's a container technology for those who don't know. So simplifying, it's a technology that allows to grab and package the information and requirements you need set up to be able to rerun a big piece of code. But getting Docker set up requires writing a Docker file, and here is a kind of a snapshot of a Docker file. And as you can see, it's not an easy thing to write, and it can get more and more complicated the more elements you have in your reproducible paper, reproducible project, or project you want to make reproducible. And so we thought about making it a bit easier for researchers, and we came up with an idea of Doctor. It's a tool that works on the top of Docker, and it grabs the code in your project and goes through the code and checks for the required packages, required system setup, dependency. And it's a command line tool that you can download and from the repositories. The links are in the Etherpad. And with a simple command, Docker compile, you will get 3 files. In this example, 3 files. This is an example of an R code, and these 3 files are available for you also to look inside and to edit. So on one hand, Docker makes it easy for you if you're not very familiar with Docker to build images, but at the same time it's all in the open, so you can look into these files and see how they're built together, so that you can learn from them. And also, the more advanced you become with your skills, you can start taking over, so generate the basic Docker file using Doctor, and then work with that Docker file to customize it according to your needs. One of the additional commands that we added to Doctor is Doctor Who, and this is related to what I mentioned about capturing the information about the metadata. So when you run the command Doctor Who on a project that you with, it will go through all the packages that are required and check who has contributed these packages. So you can get a list of contributors, and then if you want to, you can translate that to any acknowledgements or any other information. Essentially, this gets not just technical information, but also information about humans. And we have a few next steps related to working with Doctor. First of all, we're going to improve the size of the images that Doctor generates for Docker. We're using Nix for that, and we're going to be adding some support for Jupyter Notebooks and JATS for publishing. And we would love to hear back from you. These links are in the Etherpad, so if you have, I'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the update. That's really cool. Any questions for Aleksandra and Nakomi, please add them on line 336. I see that someone is looking for the link for job descriptions, and I know that the team is writing those job descriptions as we speak, and that they will be announced very soon. Is that correct, Nakomi? Aleksandra? Yes. So as soon as the job descriptions are ready, we will begin the search, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have about the project at that, and the team at that point. But just bear in mind, and please share with your friends, it's a software engineer, mostly front end, and a product UX UI person. And it's a great project, and it'll be a lot of fun. So if there aren't any more questions for the team, I'm going to move on to pre-review. And if anything comes in on line 339, please, Nakomi and Aleksandra, answer it in the pad. Okay, pre-review kicking off. We also have good news to celebrate here. They've just been awarded a grant from the Wellcome Trust and a grant from Sloan, and Daniela will describe these projects.
Yay, can you hear me? So I've got
Yes.
a phone and a computer. Great. All right, so hello everyone from warm Orlando, Florida. It's kind of a weird place, but it's warm, so I'll take it. So I am Daniela. I'm also a neuroscientist, almost PhD. And I'm also a Mozilla fellow, so that's why I'm here in Florida right now. And I'm 1/3 of the pre-review team. Pre-review, for those of you who haven't heard, it's a project that started about 1.5 years ago from just a conversation that two nerdy neuroscientists were having during a Mozilla event, kind of complaining about the fact that in academia, there are a lot of problems. Well, one of them was basically the lack of engagement of people like me and like at the time Sam Hindle, so early career researchers in the evaluation that happens around research. So what happens is that I'm doing my research and I do it for a few years, and then my ultimate goal is to publish that research in a journal. There are several problems with this whole process, but one thing that is helping kind of this speed up the way how my science and the results of our work is shared with the whole community is the internet and how we are starting to understand that in the internet is a tool that we can use to share our research before it's actually given into the hands of publishers, which is great. They provide great help, but it's kind of a long process. And so there are ways right now in which we can share our manuscript as a preprint online, and that takes less than 24 hours, and it's great and has a lot of advantages. But one of the problems, besides changing the mind of researchers and letting them understand it's a great tool for their careers, it's also that there is no comments or there is a lack of community engagement around these preprints. And I think that it's key. These preprints provide a key point in time or a key opportunity for other researchers to actually provide feedback that is constructive, that can actually help me as a researcher integrate that feedback at a point in time in which actually makes sense, which is before writing it in stones in a publication. So we saw that problem, and we thought about, well, first of all, why aren't people already commenting? There are commenting box in the in those preprint servers, in some of them, but people weren't using. So we had a survey and we asked around, and it seems like the main problem was just basically the lack of culture around providing feedback on its own, and also the fact that that space seemed to intimidate a lot of students. And so we thought about using basically already structures that are already present in academia, which are journal clubs, just informal meetings that we tend to have and discuss around science that is emerging. But most of those meetings happens on publications that are already out. So in brief, because I can go and talk forever about this, we thought the solution to some of these problems to provide not only a platform, but also to start building a community and kind of like a cultural change around how we evaluate each other's science. And so here, the first grant, and then the mini grant that we received first from Mozilla and Sloan was geared towards like starting to build this small community, one group at a time, and that was awesome. But then we also realized that we needed something like a platform where people could actually easily engage, because one of the problems with researchers is that we're busy, and so we want something that lowers that threshold. Like it's easy and it's gonna like be basically rewarding for your career. So for that, we need probably more thoughtful. We realized we need a more thoughtful process to kind of engage with our users and community. And so then the Alpha Sloan Foundation will provide the support for an initial MVP that will substitute the current platform that we have, and it will be. Is that my time? No, I'm sorry. I just heard a noise, an alarm.
I was secretly chatting a 5 that you were almost at 5 minutes, but now I just said it out loud. So.
Yeah, I'm extremely sleep deprived, so it's like one meeting after the other here. So basically, the Pre-Review 2.0 will be an open science platform that will hopefully be developed in the next 6 months. And then the other grant is actually in collaboration with Outbreak Science and Dr. Michael Johansson, and that's specifically developing a platform for review engagement of the community of outbreak scientists. So scientists that work with epidemics and public health issues where time is actually very important and very relevant to saving lives. So there is like this direct and very easy message for other scientists to adopt this new concept. So we're really excited. We're also very grateful to have Code for Science and Society fiscally sponsoring us, not only for the fiscal sponsorship, but also for the incredible mentorship that they're giving us, researchers that are not trained to actually do software development projects. So it's been an incredible learning experience. I'm excited to continue working with them. There are a couple of links there. One is to the current platform, and the other one is on GitHub. There is not much there yet, but we're planning to show and basically share our roadmap as we go. So hopefully stay tuned, and all of us will have more updates.
So I have a question while we wait to see if anything comes in from the folks who are watching the call. I'm curious about how feedback happens in outbreak science right now. So in an Ebola outbreak or the Zika outbreak, researchers are publishing preprints, but there's a lack of feedback. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there is no feedback. So that's why Outbreak Science started. As Michael is a researcher at the Center for Disease and Control, and he was very frustrated during the outbreak of Zika, one of the latest outbreaks of Zika virus, because all of those preprints were coming out. So the community is actually catching up with the needs of posting preprints. But there was no way for scientists to actually communicate and comment on that preprint, on that work. And so specifically for the Outbreak Science project, we are developing a quick way for scientists to review preprints. And so it's going to be a structured template where scientists can go along and evaluate specific topics, and then that will be visualized. The kind of crowdsourced opinions will be visualized so that different stakeholders are going to be able to engage with that information and or query in different ways depending on what their needs are. So that's a very exciting experiment for us, because we can look at the whole different spectrum of how a review or a feedback can be provided, from the longer report all the way to a more structured report that can be useful not only to scientists but doctors, practitioners, and policymakers.
Oh, that's really exciting. Are there any other questions from the group for Daniela? I think that's a lot of work that you're going to be doing to build a platform, and we'll be excited to continue to update the community on your progress and the progress, the actual acceleration of science that this should result in, which is pretty awesome. So the next and final speaker is Joe, who's going to talk about what's up with the DAT project these days. Joe, we only see the top of your head, but we know the rest of it is there. And we're ready.
Hey, everybody. I'll try and keep it quick because we only have 7 minutes left.
Those minutes are all yours.
So we received the Mozilla Open Source Sustainability Grant, which I think we announced on the last call, but I don't quite remember. So that grant sort of goes towards documentation and community building. And so I put in the Etherpad a few of the links that we've been working on. So Yashua is working on the DAT protocol implementers guide. So he's been working on a Rust implementation of DAT. And the goal for the book is basically to identify the parts of the spec that might not be as clear for somebody that's trying to implement DAT in a new language, and sort of define some of the words and just get a better sense of sort of how you actually build something, or how you build the DAT protocol. And then the other link I put in there is more of a how it works, so sort of about DAT protocol and how it works with some more visual niceties. And this is still in progress, so Duncan, who's working on this, will continue to expand on that, but I put the sort of in progress link there. And those are both ongoing throughout the rest of the year, the rest of this month. And we've also been doing a lot of other documentation related things. So started to document the planning for the next sort of features that we're working on, and then also document our organization. So we're really trying to work on organizational transparency. So that means sort of putting up all of our grants and our grant applications, which just reminded me we applied for a new grant that I have to put up there, but also being very transparent about finances. So we really want to have all the finances around DAT public, so people can sort of see, how this project's being funded, what it requires to fund an open source project, and sort of all the details around that. So yeah, a lot in the last few months around documentation of DAT and also sort of meta documentation. And those are most of the things that we've been focusing on the last few months. And I think that's all I have.
Cool. Well, 4 minutes to spare. Any questions for Joe about what's going on with DAT these days? Deafening silence. So I see one person wrote congratulations on the Moss grant, and we really appreciate that. DAT is sponsored by our nonprofit, so it's funded by grants, donations, and sometimes contract work. So it's always nice when something like that comes in, and it's especially nice that an org like Mozilla sees the benefit of supporting DAT. And so we're eager to build out some of the docs to make it easier, like what Gina is doing, make it easier for normal people, quote unquote, to understand that, but also for developers to understand how they might want to play around with it, and build integrations with other existing tools and platforms that are out there. And yeah, so that's about it for the call. I think we really want to thank all of you for joining us today. Thanks to Bradley and Terry for kicking us off and getting us all thinking about building offline first. We'd love to follow up and just share the links out that you dropped in the chat with our community. Make sure that everyone who hears the call sends you a ping about where they'd like an event to be, preferably with a link to a venue that can hold a lot of people and all that stuff. That's like a dome in the woods somewhere. Everyone keep an eye out for the job postings from Nakomi. These will be coming from the Sensilla team. These will be coming out in the next couple of weeks. And stay tuned for more updates from pre-review. Joe and I will also have some more cool new project style updates coming at you, but they're not quite ready yet. So we'll be excited to announce that in the coming months. Any other comments from our speakers before we end the call?
Thank you for organizing this.
Oh, well, thank you for coming. Thanks everyone for coming.
You.
I feel like I learned a lot, and thank you, Kirsty. Had a lot of fun, and now we're ending 2 minutes early so everyone can get back to work and have a great day. All right.
Bye.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.